From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Cheryl Kennedy. I'm with the Library of Congress. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Kimberla Lawson Roby. I totally agree. Kimberla received or earned a degree in business administration. However, she always had a feeling that she was supposed to be doing something besides working in the financial arena. When she decided that writing gave her the professional challenge that she was looking for, nothing stopped her. Not even the constant no's from the editors and the agents. She decided to self-publish her book in 1997, her first book, Behind Closed Doors, and formed Lenox Press. She said she sold more than 10,000 copies in more than 6 months. The publishing world took notice, and she was on her way to becoming an award-winning and best-selling author. Kimberla has written 16 novels, including her latest release, Secret Obsession. Her books, Behind Closed Doors and Casting the First Stone, were #1 Blackboard bestsellers for 4 consecutive months in both 1997 and 2000. Secret Obsession made the New York Times bestseller list in the first week it was released this month. In addition, Kimberla's first novel was nominated for Blackboard's 1998 and 1999 Fiction Book of the Year Award, and she received the Blackboard Fiction Book of the Year Award in 2001 for Casting the First Stone. She is also the 2006, 2007, 2009, and 2011 recipient, and 2010 recipient of the Author of the Year Female Award presented by the African American Literary Awards Show in New York. Each of Kimberla's novels have dealt with very real contemporary issues, including gambling addiction, infidelity, single motherhood, infertility, corruption of the church, domestic violence, and racial and gender discrimination in the workplace. It's my pleasure to present to you Kimberla Lawson Roby.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It is an honor to be back in Washington, D.C., and always a privilege for me to be in our nation's capital. I have been traveling around the country over the last 3 weeks touring for my latest book, which Cheryl mentioned is called Secret Obsession. For all of you Curtis fans, it's not a Curtis Black book, but it is a story that still deals with real-life social issues, the same as I've done with each of my other titles. In this case, the main character is Paige Donahue, and her sister is Camille. Well, Paige has envied her sister ever since they were children. Camille has no idea about that, but Paige has seen her as the sister who the parents loved more, they treated her better, and now that they are adults, Camille has a beautiful house. She has the best husband who loves her completely. She has 2 beautiful children, and she just lives a great life. And so Paige really envies her and despises her more than ever before. And then suddenly she starts thinking, enough is enough. Why should my sister have everything? Why should people love her more? And she sets out on this mission to take her sister's husband, for herself. And so that's how it begins. And I think I was really mostly inspired to write this particular story, not so much because I know of sisters who have been in this particular situation, but because when I see certain friends, or sometimes you have acquaintances, and people can sometimes smile in your face, but sometimes they're thinking something very differently behind your back. So that's what that story is about. What I want to do, before I allow you to ask any questions that you might have, is give you an idea of how I started my career, why I write the stories that I write, and just what my journey has been thus far. I always like to begin by saying that writing was not a lifelong dream of mine, and I share that because so many writer friends of mine will tell me that they knew when they were small children that this is what they wanted to do. And for me, it was not until I was 30 years old and in 1995 that I sat down and wrote the first book, Behind Closed Doors. I worked in corporate America, I worked for the state of Illinois, and my last full-time job I had before becoming a full-time writer, I worked as a financial analyst for the city of Rockford, Illinois. So, what I did in my career and in getting a degree in business had absolutely nothing to do with writing. But when I started feeling as though I wasn't moving up the career ladder as quickly as I wanted to or thought that I should have, and just started feeling like there was something else that I was supposed to be doing, I started sitting down and really reevaluating my life and my career path. And so I started even thinking back to elementary school teachers and remembered that I had a teacher named Mr. Groff in 6th grade who would always encourage me to write. And he would say, when you're older, this is what you should do for a living. You should be a writer one day. And so while I never paid a whole lot of attention to it, I did start thinking about it at that time. And then I thought about my junior high school teachers and high school, and then even some professors and instructors in college who had said, you really should consider a career in writing. But when I think back now, when people ask me, well, why didn't you? If you were getting that kind of advice and that kind of encouragement, why wouldn't you go on to study writing or English or journalism or become a writer? And so I always say, it's kind of an interesting thing because by the time I was in high school and I was getting ready to graduate, I started researching the salaries of writers versus people who majored in business. And I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to be a writer. That's kind of out the window. And so that is why I went on to major in business administration. But so as I moved on and started thinking about that, I thought, maybe I will give this a try. And so, as I said, in 1995, while still working as a financial analyst, I sat down and just started coming home every single evening, and I just started writing my book. And I worked every weekend, and I worked on holidays, and I did that for 7 months until the book was complete. At that point, I started out on this mission of trying to find a literary agent to represent me because the publishing industry really prefers that you have someone representing you other than you just sending your manuscript, which they consider to be an unsolicited manuscript because they're getting hundreds of those on a weekly basis. So I compiled a listing, sent it out to one agent after another, and sat back and just waited because in my mind I thought, well, it'll just be a matter of choosing which agent to go with. I had that kind of confidence. But lo and behold, the reality struck and I received one rejection letter after another and just one rejection letter after another, and they just rolled in throughout several weeks. And so then I sat back and thought, wow, this is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. And even though the editors at publishing houses are saying that they need me to have, they really want an author to have an agent, I can't find one, so I am going to try to send it to them directly. So once again, I compiled a listing of editors and sent out query letters, and in some cases a few chapters, and in some cases the entire manuscript, sat back and waited. But once again, all of the rejection letters came in one after another. And so at that point, I really had decided that, enough is enough. I'm not really that person to beat a dead horse, and that it was time for me to move on. But as my mom kept hearing me say that, she said, well, I understand how you feel. I know you're disappointed, and I know this has been a very discouraging time for you, but the fact that we have taken so many copies of your manuscript and we've passed them around to so many readers here locally. We had given them to people that I worked with, people that she worked with, people that my husband worked with, people at our church, just so many people had read it. And she said, they're saying they can't put it down and how much they've enjoyed it, and I think that means something. And I just really wish you wouldn't give up. And so I did hear her, but when you've had a mother who has been telling you can do anything since you were a little bitty thing, how much does that really weigh, in your mind? And so, but I did hear her, and then finally it was my husband who said, well, you have this background in business. Why can't you take that experience and start your own company and publish the book yourself? And so that's how the whole idea of self-publishing came about. I knew nothing about it, but I purchased every book that I could find on the subject, read it from cover to cover, did some additional research to find out what we would have to do to promote the book nationally. Because when I realized the amount of money that we would have to invest, I realized it needed to go a lot further than just in the city of Rockford, Illinois. It needed to go further than even regionally, that I wanted to try my best to get it out on the national level. And so then when I realized that it was worth maybe giving a try, still the question in my mind to my husband was, well, we're going to take money from your 401k account. we have to use some of our personal savings, and we even have to get a small loan to go with that. What if this doesn't work? Have you thought about that? And I remember him saying, if it doesn't work, then you just move on to something else. But do you really want to go, say, 10 years down the road, wondering if you maybe could have had some success with this? And so I've never forgotten that, and I always share that with people everywhere I go, because even if you're sitting here today and it's not writing that you want to do, whatever it is you have had this dream about doing, whatever you know your passion is, and your passion just means it's the one thing that you would do every single day, even if nobody paid you, that you love it that much. But once you know what your passion is, then you figure out what your purpose is, and then I always say the money will follow. And so here I was thinking, wow, I couldn't earn a living in writing, and I moved on to the business world. And then when I finally did what I believe that God has placed me on this earth to do, then I have been able to make a good living from it. So at that point, when I started going through the self-publishing process, and that is hiring a jacket designer and getting someone to proof the pages and creating this marketing plan to figure out how to get it into bookstores and placed with wholesalers and distributors, that took me throughout the entire summer of 1996. And once again, I was still working full time. But by the fall of that year, 3,000 copies of Behind Closed Doors were delivered to my house and kind of piled into a guest bedroom. And so I have to tell you, while that was an exciting day, it was also a very terrifying day, because I remember looking in the room and thinking, wow, I must have been completely out of my mind. Books are everywhere. So, who's going to buy these? People don't know me. Who says anybody's going to enjoy this? I know what people have enjoyed here locally, but what does that mean for readers around the country? But even at that point, it was too late to turn around and change my mind. And so we set out in trying to get the books out there. And thankfully, it started doing very well. And it sold mainly because of independent bookstores throughout the country. And then it was finally placed in the chain bookstores like Barnes & Noble. And then I was able to take the information back once the sales were doing so good after the first 3 or 4 months. I did find an agent to take me on, and then she was able to go on and sell my second novel that I had not even written yet, and that was just based on the success of the first. And so by the 6-month period of my publication, I had sold just over 10,000 copies, and so moved on from there. And now this book, Secret Obsession, is my 16th title. My 17th title, which will be the 9th in my Reverend Curtis Black series, comes out next May. It's called The Reverend's Wife, and then I'm currently working on the 18th. So this has really been a truly wonderful journey. It's been just a blessing, I have to say, of a lifetime for me, and something that I'm very thankful and humbled by and very grateful for. So what I'd like to do now is just offer all of you an opportunity to ask any questions, whether it be about my writing, the process, my storylines, about me, whatever it might be. Please feel free to ask now. I guess they have a couple of mics in each of the aisles. We don't want everybody to stand up at one time, though, so.
I just have a question about self-publishing,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like probably back then when you started, I don't know if that many people were doing it, but now today it seems like everybody's doing it. So
Yes.
how would a person today kind of distinguish themselves even if they're self-published?
To figure out. Well, the thing is, you're right. It is a very different day today in terms of self-publishing, because, I did it toward the summer fall of 1996. And so now there are so many more print-on-demand companies. There are a lot of quote-unquote self-publishing companies even, so that you don't have to actually start your own business and publish the book yourself. Someone else can print it for you and even kind of help get the word out. So what I have been saying to new writers who are interested in doing that is still I believe that it is worth first trying to find an agent and trying to find a publisher who will publish your book in the traditional format. But if you're not able to, then really research the companies that are out there and see which ones are reputable, and ask for references of other authors who have used them, so that you're dealing with somebody who's not trying to take you, for your money. When I was at the festival in Baltimore yesterday, a woman said that her sister had paid as much as $10,000 and still had not seen her book in print. And so those are the kinds of companies you really, really want to be careful for. And then even once you go through getting your book published, no matter who you do that with, really, really sit down and figure out the best way to promote your book, because it can be on the bookshelf, but you really want to make sure that people know about you and your title and that it's out there and available for them. Yes. Where you
Do you
going?
have a blog where you give hints on self-publishing?
No, I do not. And I've been asked about that for a number of years. And so I think maybe I probably should start doing that. I think it's a matter of finding the time to do that. But what I do, and I do this no matter who emails me, if you email me, then I probably give you more information than I would on the blog. So any question that anybody has, I usually sit down and try to map that out. So if you even want to do that, please feel free to. Okay, thank you.
I actually have a twofold question.
Okay.
First of all, where did you get the idea of Reverend Curtis Black, and have you ever had any offers to turn it into a movie?
Okay. To answer your first question, the Reverend Curtis Black, and for any of you who have not read my work, the Reverend Curtis Black is a very popular pastor character that I never knew would be this popular when I wrote the first book, Casting the First Stone. But he is a man who stands in the pulpit on Sunday morning, but he is consumed with money, power, and lots of women. Not so much today where the series has taken him, but in the very beginning, that's who he was. And so he is not one particular pastor that I'm writing about. He's a mixture and a compilation of many men of God that I have seen throughout my years of life. I've been in church my entire life, and so I've seen and heard a lot, even with other churches in my city, as well as in the state of Illinois, and of course now around the country. What I always think is the most interesting for me since I started writing this book is when I travel around on the tours to the various cities, that people have no problem telling me the real names of their pastors who are just like mine. And so that kind of tells you how prevalent it is. And certainly the Reverend Curtis Black is not representative of every minister in the country. There are some truly wonderful ministers and pastors who are doing the right thing, and they're really trying to walk the walk and not just tell people what to do. But for those who are not, I'm always hoping that my character will show people that you have to be very careful in terms of who your religious leaders are and who you're following, and that really it's about building your own personal relationship with God and not necessarily worshiping another person who's standing in a pulpit. As far as film rights, the film rights for Casting the First Stone were just optioned in November of last year, so I'm, hoping and praying that something happens with that. 1 in a Million was optioned 3 years ago, so as you can tell, it can be a very long process. But the script is written, a director has been hired, and now they're actually looking for an actress to play the Kennedy character for that story. So hopefully we'll see that sooner rather than later. Yes. Oh.
But I just wanted to let you know that the scope of your books goes beyond the borders of the United States. I was in the military stationed overseas for 10 years, and literally the installations that I was stationed at, we were waiting for the next book to come out. So we have fans all over.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
When I think about writing a book, which I'm almost finished doing, I also think about how stratified the market is. And somehow George W. Bush can write a book, Laura Bush can write a book, Dick Cheney can write a book, and only so many people are going to be buying books in a world that no longer has borders.
Right.
So when I think about access to the marketplace, and I think about whether or not you can find an agent who's honestly able to deliver value
Yes.
for a price, I would think that really the standard should be first trying to stratify who the agents are, and then trying to determine that if your book has value, they should be willing to take it on a contingency basis or not at all. Any comments?
Yeah, well, I agree with you completely, because it's, sort of a situation where agents don't always know whether they will sell the book or not. I mean, of course, when they decide to take you on, their hope is that they will find the perfect editor, the perfect publishing house that will be willing to acquire your work and do a good job with getting the word out about it and selling it. But I don't know. You know, the industry is really changing, and it's changing at a very rapid rate. So I don't know that any will take it on contingency, but I do understand what you're saying, and I would see why someone would do it. And it may come to that, because I think now it may be a matter of trying to keep as many authors as you can, even when you start talking about the ebook community. I mean, lots of authors more and more are publishing on ebook and not even doing their books in print anymore. So, you know, it's a changing world. It'll be interesting to see how it all turns out. Mm-hmm. Yes.
When you had all those 3,000 books in your house, how did you begin to move them?
Mm-hmm.
You must have panicked. So
I know I did.
what did you do?
I did. Well, this is the thing too that I share. You know, it's amazing how you start out doing one thing, and everything that you do in this life is sort of a stepping stone for the next thing and the next thing, and to where you ultimately will end up. Because I often wondered, you know, first of all, well, gosh, now why did I major in business administration if I was going to end up being a writer, and on top of that, a writer of fiction? And I remember there's two things. One thing I said to my mom before she passed away, you know, I wish I'd started writing right out of college. I wish that I hadn't waited until I was 30. Can you imagine how many more books I had written? You know, it's just really this ambitious attitude, because I loved writing so much. And she said, well, just let's say you had started at 22 right out of college. What were you going to talk about? You know, you really hadn't experienced a whole lot. And I thought about that and realized how right she was. But getting back to, I'm sorry, yes. And so what my business degree, I think, really did for me was it allowed me to be able to sit down and create a marketing plan, figure out my niche, figure out how do I promote my book locally, then regionally, and then on a national level, how to go about trying to get certain kinds of publicity and putting together my own national tour even without having a major publisher. So that's where I think the business background really made that much of a difference for me. But at the same time, there are so many books out there that will help you and teach you how to promote your work. There's one book called 100 or 1001 Ways to Promote Your Book by John Kremer, Kremer. And so he has lots and lots of ideas that will help you do that. Mm-hmm. Hello.
Hi, I'm Sheila. Since I was in the 6th grade,
Yes.
my parents gave me a diary.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, I've been keeping like a little journal
Yes.
on everything, life, health, entertainment, everything.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering if I can actually start out by putting that together and start writing a book. Do you think that would be a good start, or should I just start, because it starts from like elementary
All the way till now.
you know,
Wow.
yeah, to
Well,
now.
you probably could. I mean, lots of, when you think about even The Color Purple, it's written in a diary format, and there are a number of books out there that are. So it's probably just a matter of you taking it, starting out in elementary school to now, and condensing it, just figuring out what the really important parts are, or something that, you know, maybe something that you would consider to be really interesting for the reader. But it definitely can be done because it's been done before, for sure.
Would it be something like an autobiography? I didn't want it to be like an autobiography.
It probably would feel like that to a certain extent, but I think you could almost write it to where it's just more of a story format.
Yeah.
I think you could get away with doing that without calling it an autobiography. But if you're not going to change much of anything and all the names are going to stay the same, it still probably would be considered in the category of nonfiction.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for the work you do. It's really been an encouragement.
Thank you.
And for young people to see so often your book out there on those shelves.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. So you've been a real encouragement. What I wanted to ask you is about the process.
Okay.
Not everyone has the discipline or even knows where to begin. I'm sure that your first title was probably not your first title, that you had a working title before that. So I wonder if you could share right back from the beginning as to how you established the discipline to show up every day for 7 months doing some kind of writing.
Yes. And you're right. You know, even today, after all these years, the discipline is the challenge, because it's not like you have somebody telling you that you have to sit down and do it every single day. But even then, with behind closed doors, I was coming home from work every day, and I always say it became more of a family affair because my husband kind of just took over whatever my responsibilities normally would have been in the house. And even if he was working really long hours, my mom would say, hey, I'm just going to cook dinner and drop it off to you guys, or I'm going to pick up the laundry and do it this week. It became their priority even for me to go ahead and finish this book no matter what. So that's kind of how I think I was able to find the discipline then. And to me, it was easier with the first book because I wanted it so badly, and I really wanted to see myself finish it and hopefully see it published. But even now, I think, I'm really encouraged and motivated by my deadlines that are in my contract. So, you find a lot of discipline when you have to go ahead and get it done. And for me, it's not so much about writing maybe just a few pages or a chapter every day, though I do suggest that it is a good thing to really write every single day, even if it's just a paragraph or a page. But for me, it's really carving out a good 6 weeks, sometimes 7 weeks, to work on nothing but my first draft. So I really don't do any other week. I don't talk to a lot of people on the phone. I don't do as much emailing. I don't do much of anything at all around the house. And so I just write for hours and hours every day until that first draft is finished. The other thing that helps me with that too is when I'm starting out, say for example, just with the initial idea, the book that I'm writing now, I just started thinking, okay, what are the topics that I want to cover? Well, I wanted to cover a topic of drug addiction, but from a standpoint that it would happen with a family that nobody would suspect it to happen with, a husband and a wife who are very well educated, they have great jobs, and they are great parents to their 12-year-old daughter, but somehow, some way, one of them begins socializing, the other one, begins doing the same thing, and it turns into a nightmare. So I knew that. Then from that point, I started visualizing what the wife looked like, what the husband looked like, what the daughter looked like. Then I started figuring out, well, what are their names? And then I start outlining the actual chapters. Once I have, it actually had a 2 or 3 page, 2.5 page synopsis. And then I start outlining chapter 1. So I could have maybe 1 or 2 pages of what chapter 1 will be about, and I'll keep doing that. So when I'm ready now to go and start writing the first draft of the actual chapters, I'll read the short synopsis of chapter 1, and then I'll turn that into maybe 10 pages. The next chapter, I'll read the synopsis, and I'll turn that into 10, 15 pages, and just keep going from there.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, yes, go ahead. Hello.
I have written one book, and that book seemed easy to write because it was semi-autobiographical. The next book that I'm in the midst of, I suddenly see it being advertised as a future TV show. And so I'm like, okay, do I go in another direction, or do I continue with the vision that I originally had? So it's kind of strange, but the plots are so similar that I don't want to finish this book.
It's very similar to your last book?
It's similar to the TV show that's coming out.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay. Wow, that's a hard one. Yeah, that's a hard one. It's really what you feel comfortable with, I guess. I mean, if it's not different enough, like, do you believe it would be something that if people read it, they say, wow, this is exactly like that?
Or maybe I got the idea
from there, yeah. So I don't know. That's a hard question, for me to answer. But I think you just have to figure out what you're comfortable with, or maybe you could let some others read it and see what their feelings are about it. Okay, thank you. So, any more questions, or okay, yes, go ahead.
I want to ask, have you ever been tempted to write about something different, like or cross genres in a certain way, because of pressure, let's say, from other authors who they've gained this type of success on this level with different type of genre? Have you ever been tempted to go straight from what you want?
No, never, absolutely not. And I think it's because I always feel like my writing style and my voice that I have, that I have to stick with that, because if I don't think it'll ring true to readers, and I think they would recognize it. And so it's kind of a thing. I always feel like writers, you have to stay in your own lane and do what you believe you're supposed to do, and then just kind of go from there. And you're right, there are lots of genres out there where you look and say, wow, this person is really, really successful, and you can see where readers are really picking up books in that genre more and more and more. But at the same time, this is what I feel comfortable with, and doing so, I'm fine with that. Mm-hmm.
Are you the type of author that doesn't want anybody to read your stuff while you're writing it? Do you let anybody read your stuff while in progress? And who are the first group of people that you let read your book after? Is it your mother, is your husband, your editor, that kind of
who it is? Okay. No, when I'm actually writing it, I don't let anyone read it until it's really ready to be submitted to my publishing house. And then once I submit it to my editor there, then I have 5 readers, and so they are women who are of totally different age ranges, and they have totally different likes in terms of what they read. They live their lives in a totally different way, so that I can sort of get a well-rounded opinion from them. And so that's pretty much what I do, but it's always been that 5 pretty much throughout my entire career.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I always like to know about the environment of a writer.
Mm-hmm.
What tools you use, how comfortable you are working with them.
Yes.
I'm just curious, because you seem to be very disciplined. You seem like you might use the internet or the word processor.
A lot.
I was wondering if you ever used pen, pencil, anything like that, and what's your environment like?
Okay. Sometimes when I am in the synopsis or outlining process, I have many notebooks, and I will take a notebook and use a pen. Sometimes it just feels more natural for me to do that. But with the actual chapters, I do use my word processor, so I'm typing the entire time. It's from thought to computer screen is what I always like to say. But as far as my environment, when I started out my career, I was sitting at my desktop in my home office, and that was comfortable. I did the first maybe 3 books that way. Then I started taking my laptop and going into different rooms of my house, and that felt comfortable. I think it was becoming a little monotonous to me to just stay in my home office. Then it got to a point over the last, say, 6 years that I started literally reserving a room at a hotel and going there. So that's what I do now when I'm starting, and then even sometimes I'll go again as I know I'm going to wrap up and finish the book, and I'll go there for 7-8 days straight, and literally, I have an outgoing message on my voicemail that says, I'm away writing. If this is an emergency, I probably won't get back to you for a couple of weeks. I get up in the morning, I'll get something to eat, I talk to my husband, I'll talk to him during my breaks when I order lunch or dinner to the room, and then I'll talk to him at bedtime, and then I start doing the same thing the next day. And so on those days when I go away to the hotel, I do 12 to 14 hours every single day. And so really, I figured out that is the best environment for me, because there's nothing to distract me, and I'm really able to focus on the work. And so, there's no distraction of maybe doing the laundry, because you'll look for things to do to put off, from what the task at hand is. And, I'm not sitting around watching a full day of Law and Order SVU on the marathon days, and I'm not watching Lifetime Movie Network all day long. And so that really, really has helped me. And so I've just kind of stuck with that. And I think I will stick with that from this point on. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, one more question.
Do you ever get to where you're struggling with the dialogue for a character? And if so, how do you figure out how to get what you need?
I don't really ever feel like that with the dialogue. I always feel like the characters are speaking pretty much constantly and consistently throughout my writing from the beginning of the book to the end. And so I don't really get a lot of writer's block at all, even with the narrative, but I think it is because I outline my chapters. So I kind of have a good idea of what that chapter is going to be about as I'm writing it. So thank you. Well, I just want to thank all of you so much for being here and giving me this opportunity to speak with you and share with you. And if you've not picked up my books, I hope you'll give them a try. You can also go to my website, which is kimroby.com, and you can read a 1 or 2 chapter excerpt of all 16 books. So thank you all very, very much.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.